Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more heart-touching tales. Wishing you a beautiful day now, sit back and enjoy the story. Asterisk, the crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the marble floor as Clara Winters pressed her ear to the heavy oak door of Julian Blake's study. The muffled conversation inside carried the weight of desperation, though she couldn't make out the words. She shouldn't be listening. 3 years of cleaning these halls had taught her the art of invisibility, but tonight something felt different. The air hummed with tension, thick as the storm clouds gathering outside the mansion's towering windows. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the portraits of dead Blake ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow her retreat down the corridor. Clara's hands trembled as she polished the same silver frame for the 3rd time, her mind replaying the fragments she'd overheard. Bankruptcy, merger, last chance. Julian Blake had built his empire on shadows and secrets, but now those shadows were swallowing him whole. Miss Winters. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. Clara spun around, the cloth falling from her fingers. Julian stood in the doorway of his study, silhouetted against the amber light within. Even disheveled, with his tie loosened and dark hair falling across his forehead, he commanded the space around him like gravity itself bent to his will. "Mr. Blake, I was just finishing the corridor, were you?" His pale blue eyes held hers captive. "Or were you doing something else entirely?" The accusation hung between them, sharp and dangerous. Clara's pulse hammered against her throat, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness to predators only made them hungrier. "I clean what needs cleaning, sir. Nothing more." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition?
Most people wilted
under Julian Blake's scrutiny, but Clara had survived worse storms than the one brewing in his eyes. She'd had to, after what happened in Chicago. After what she'd done, "I need you to accompany me to dinner tonight." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Sir, the Meridian Club? 8 o'clock, or something appropriate?" He turned to leave, then paused. "This isn't a request, Miss Winters. It's a necessity." "I don't understand." "I'm your housekeeper, not your date." Julian's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. Date. He stepped closer, and Clara caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker. Desperation, maybe. "I need someone who can sit quietly, smile on cue, and ask no questions. Someone disposable." The cruel honesty of it stole her breath. Clara had been called many things in her 28 years, but never disposable. Not to her face, anyway. "What if I refuse?" "Then you'll find yourself unemployed by morning." His smile was arctic. "I'm sure you understand the position that puts you in. A woman with your particular history wouldn't find it easy to secure new employment." The blood drained from Clara's face. Somehow, Julian Blake had discovered what she'd buried in Chicago. The reason she'd fled across the country with nothing but a fabricated resume and desperate hope. The reason she'd accepted a job far below her qualifications and kept her head down for 3 years. "How? I make it my business to know everything about the people in my house." Julian's voice dropped to a whisper. "Your real name is Clara Thorne, formerly of Morrison and Associates, formerly engaged to Marcus Morrison. Formerly accused of embezzling $2.7 million from client accounts." The words hit like physical blows. Clara's carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. 3 years of careful anonymity crumbling in seconds. "I was cleared. Of all charges, were you? Or did Daddy's connections and a convenient suicide make the investigation disappear?" Julian's eyes glittered with cruel satisfaction. Marcus Morrison found dead in his office just days before he was scheduled to testify. "How fortunate for you, you bastard." The words escaped before Clara could stop them, raw and savage. "Careful. Miss Winters, or should I say, Miss Thorne. You're in no position to make demands or hurl insults." Julian straightened his tie with deliberate precision. 8 o'clock. "The black dress hanging in your closet will suffice. I took the liberty of having it delivered." He walked away, leaving Clara alone in the corridor with the weight of her shattered secrets. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky like the laughter of gods. She closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her, remembering another storm, another night when her world had burned to ash. Marcus hadn't killed himself. Clara knew, because she'd been there, had watched the life fade from his eyes as her fingers pressed against his throat. Self-defense, she'd told herself then. He'd discovered her real activities, the money she'd been funneling to offshore accounts, not for greed, but for survival. The debts her father had left, the threats that followed her across state lines. Marcus had threatened to expose everything, to destroy the careful network she'd built to keep herself alive, so she'd destroyed him first. Now Julian Blake held that secret like a knife to her throat, and Clara realized she might have underestimated the wolf in shepherd's clothing she'd been serving for 3 years. The question was, how much did he really know? And what did he want beyond tonight's dinner? Clara climbed the servant's stairs to her small room, where a black dress waited on her bed like a funeral shroud. As she lifted the silk fabric, her fingers found something hidden in the fold. A note, written in Julian's precise handwriting. Some secrets are worth dying for. Others are worth living for. Choose wisely. Outside, lightning illuminated the mansion's grounds, and Clara wondered if she was staring into the face of her salvation or her damnation. The Meridian Club breathed old money and older secrets. Crystal glasses caught candlelight like captured stars, while leather-bound chairs harbored conversations that could topple governments. Clara's heels clicked against marble floors that had witnessed a century of power plays, each step echoing her thundering heartbeat. Julian's hand pressed against the small of her back, guiding her through the dining room with practiced ease. To any observer, they might have looked like a couple, but Clara felt the tension radiating from his touch. This wasn't romance, this was war, and she was both weapon and shield. "Smile," he murmured against her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "We're being watched." Clara lifted her chin and let her lips curve into something that might have passed for contentment. 3 years of hiding had taught her to wear masks like second skin. But beneath the silk dress and borrowed jewelry, her mind raced with calculations. Julian needed her here for a reason beyond simple companionship. Men like him didn't collect trophy women from their housekeeping staff without deeper motivation. Julian Blake. The voice carried the weight of boardrooms and buried scandals. "I wasn't certain you'd show," the man approaching their table could. "Had been carved from granite and dressed in Armani. Silver hair, predatory smile, eyes that missed nothing." Clara recognized the type, the apex predator who fed on weakness and wore power like cologne. Victor Langford. Julian's voice carried warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "I haven't agreed to anything yet." Langford's gaze swept over Clara like a scanner pricing merchandise. "And you are, Clara?" Extended her hand, noting how Langford's grip lingered just long enough to establish dominance. Charmed. Something shifted in Langford's expression. Recognition? Suspicion? Clara's pulse quickened, but she maintained her smile. "Have we met before?" Langford settled into his chair, never breaking eye contact. "You seem familiar." "Have." One of those faces. Clara's voice carried just the right note of self-deprecation. "People often think they know me." Julian's fingers found hers across the table, squeezing once in what might have been warning or encouragement. "Clara is helping me transition into new ventures." "How modern of you." Langford's smile sharpened. "I do so admire a man who values diverse perspectives." The waiter appeared with champagne, and Clara noted Julian's slight tremor as he lifted his glass. Whatever game he was playing, the stakes were eating him alive from the inside. She'd seen that look before, in her own mirror during the weeks after Marcus died. 2 new partnerships, Langford toasted. 2 inevitable outcomes, Julian replied. They drank, and Clara tasted metal beneath the bubbles. Blood, perhaps, or fear. Round them, the club's other patrons continued their careful dances of influence and intimidation. But she felt isolated in this triangle of tension. "Your company has been struggling," Langford said without preamble. "The Hoffman deal fell through. The Patterson merger died in committee. Whispers of insolvency grow louder each quarter. Julian's composure never wavered. Rumors of my demise have been greatly exaggerated. Have they? Langford leaned forward. "'Cause my sources suggest you have perhaps 6 weeks before the banks call in their markers. 6 weeks before Blake Industries becomes another casualty of overambition." Clara watched Julian's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. What? She'd read the signs correctly. The mansion, the cars, the carefully maintained facade, all of it, balanced on a knife's edge. "Which is why we're here," Julian said. "I have something you want. Do you?" Langford's laugh was winter wind through graveyards. "'Cause I'd rather think it's the other way around. You need my consortium's backing to survive the next quarter. I, on the other hand, can simply wait for the bankruptcy auction." "You could," Julian agreed. "But then you'd never get what you really want." Langford's expression shifted, predatory interest replacing casual cruelty. And what might that be? Julian's smile was answer enough. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a single photograph, placing it face down on the table. "This was taken 6 months ago in your private office." Langford's composure cracked like ice over deep water. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Julian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Senator Michaels, your daughter's trust fund. The defense contracts that just happened to land in your lap after certain voting patterns emerged. You have no proof." Julian flipped the photograph. Clara couldn't see the image, but Langford's face went ash-gray. "Proof of what?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Both men turned to her, and Clara realized she'd made a critical error. She'd revealed investment, curiosity beyond her supposed role as decorative accompaniment. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Langford said, his voice strained. "No." Julian's eyes never left Clara's face. "She stays. I trust her implicitly." The lie rolled off his tongue like honey, but Clara caught the calculation beneath it. He wasn't protecting her. He was using her, making her a witness to whatever revelation was about to unfold. "The Meridian Club has very thin walls," Julian continued. "Amazing how sound carries in these old buildings. Amazing what security cameras capture when people think they're safe." Langford's hand shook as he reached for his champagne. "What do you want?" "Full backing. 50 million in immediate capital injection. And your silence regarding certain Chicago activities that may have been mischaracterized in the press." Clara's blood turned to ice. It wasn't just using her past as leverage against her. It was using it as leverage against Langford. "You son of a bitch," she breathed. "Clara, no." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against marble. "Whatever game you're playing, leave me out of it. Sit down." Julian's voice carried steel. "Please." The please was what made her pause. Not a command, but a request that carried the weight of desperation. Clara looked at his face, really looked, saw something she hadn't expected. Fear Julian Blake was afraid. Not of Langford, not of bankruptcy, but of losing her. The realization hit like vertigo, spinning her carefully mapped world into chaos. "Is about more than money," she said slowly. "Everything is about money," Langford interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. "No." Clara sank back into her chair, her mind racing. "This is personal." Julian's mask finally slipped, revealing something raw and wounded beneath. "Victor Langford killed my father." All the words hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Round them, the Meridian Club continued its careful rituals, but their table had become an island of stunned silence. Julian Langford began. 20 years ago, your father discovered your arrangement with Senator Michaels, threatened to expose it. You had him silenced. Your father died in a car accident. My father died because his brake lines were cut. Julian's voice was steady as a surgeon's hand. I've spent 2 decades gathering proof. Tonight, you're going to pay for what you took from me. Clara's breath caught. She understood now why Julian had brought her, why he'd chosen someone with blood on her hands. He needed an ally who couldn't judge him for seeking justice outside the law. He needed someone who understood that sometimes the system failed and personal action became the only recourse. "What are you asking of me?" whispered Julian, met her eyes across the table, and Clara saw her own reflection staring back. Two damaged souls, bound by secrets and circumstances, standing at the edge of something that might be redemption or might be damnation. Help me destroy the man who destroyed my family. Langford was already reaching for his phone, but Clara's hand closed over his wrist with surprising strength.
I wouldn't.
She said softly. You have no idea what I'm capable of. For the first time since she'd entered the club, Clara felt truly alive. The safe house smelled of dust and abandonment. Hidden in a district where gentrification hadn't yet reached and questions weren't asked. Clara watched Julian pace the narrow room like a caged predator, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking after 3 hours of silence following their escape from the Meridian Club. You didn't have to come with me. His voice carried exhaustion beneath the gratitude. Yes, I did. Clara sat cross-legged on the threadbare couch, still wearing the black dress that had become her armor for the evening. Langford recognized. Me. Not from Chicago, but from something else. Something recent. Julian stopped pacing. What do you mean? The way he looked at me, like he'd been expecting me. Clara's fingers traced patterns on her knee, a nervous habit from childhood. How long have you been planning this? 2 years? Maybe 3? Julian sank into the chair across from her, suddenly looking older than his 35 years. Ever. Since I found the garage where they worked on my father's car. And me? How long have you known who I really am? The silence stretched between them like a blade. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, and Clara wondered if they were meant for her and Julian, or just another casualty of the city's endless hunger. 6 months, Julian finally admitted, I hired a private investigator to background check everyone in my house after someone tried to poison me. Poison? Clara's head snapped up. When? It's Christmas party. Something in the wine. Spent 3 days in the hospital, and the doctors called it food poisoning. Julian's laugh was bitter. I knew better. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Langford? I thought so. But then my investigator came back with your file, and I realized maybe I'd been looking in the wrong direction. Julian met her eyes. Maybe the threat was already. Inside my house, the accusation hit like a physical blow. Clara stood abruptly, anger flaring hot in her chest. You think I tried to kill you? I thought about it. Woman with your skills, your motivations, access to my food, my drink, my private spaces. Julian's voice remained calm, analytical. It would have been elegant. But you don't think that. Now? No. He stood as well, moving closer. Because I watched you tonight. The way you handled Langford, the way you protected me without being asked. Someone trying to kill me wouldn't have done that. Unless it was a long game. Unless it was. Julian stopped, just out of arm's reach, close enough that Clara could see the gold flecks in his pale eyes. But I don't think you're playing a long game, Clara. I think you're running from the same demons I am. The truth of it settled between them like shared understanding. To damaged people, bound by circumstances and secrets, standing in a room that smelled of other people's failures. So who did try to poison you? I have suspicions. Julian moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. But suspicions aren't proof. And I've learned the hard way that accusation without evidence is just another form of suicide. Clara joined him at the window, their shoulders almost touching. The street below pulsed with neon signs and shadows. A landscape of survival and desperation. What's our next move? Are you involved me in this, Julian? Made me complicit? There's no backing out now. Clara's reflection stared back from the glass, pale and determined. Besides, you need me. Do I? Langford won't just roll over because you threatened him tonight. He'll fight back, and he'll use every resource at his disposal. Clara turned to face Julian fully, including the truth about Chicago. You're afraid he'll expose you. I'm afraid he'll expose us both. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. Because there's something you don't know about Marcus Morrison's death, something that changes everything. Julian went very still. What? He wasn't alone in his office that night. The words felt like shards of glass in Clara's throat. Someone else was there. Someone who watched me kill him and did nothing to stop it. Who? I don't know. They stayed in the shadows, never spoke. But they left something behind. Clara reached into the hidden pocket of her dress and withdrew a silver cufflink, ornate and expensive. This Julian took the cufflink with trembling fingers, turning it over to reveal the engraved initials. VL. Victor Langford, he breathed. He was there, Julian. He watched me commit murder, and he said nothing, which means he wanted Marcus dead too. Julian's expression shifted from shock to something darker. But why? Before Clara could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You have something that belongs to me. The Riverside warehouse. Midnight. Come alone or everyone. Learns about Chicago. Julian read over her shoulder. It's a trap. Of course it is. 8. Clara deleted the message and pocketed the phone. But it's also an opportunity to do what? To finally get answers. Clara moved to the duffel bag she'd grabbed from the mansion, withdrawing items she'd hoped never to use again. A compact pistol, ammunition, and a knife with a handle worn smooth by familiar grip. And to finish what started in Marcus Morrison's, "Office, Clara, no? This is insane. Is it?" She checked the pistol's magazine with practiced efficiency. "You've spent 20 years planning revenge against the man who killed your father. I've spent 3 years running from the truth about the man I killed. Maybe it's time we both stopped running." Julian caught her wrist as she holstered the weapon. "If we do this, there's no going back. No pretending to be different people. No hiding from what we've done." Good. Clara's smile held no warmth. "I'm tired of hiding. And if it's a trap, if Langford kills us both, then we die knowing the truth." Clara freed her wrist gently but decisively. It's more than most people get. Julian stared at her for a long moment, and Clara saw the exact instant he made his choice. His father's killer waited in a warehouse by the river, and 3 years of careful planning had led to this moment. "I'm coming with you, Julian, no arguments." His voice carried final authority. "If we're doing this, we're doing it together." Clara nodded once, understanding that their partnership had shifted into something deeper. No longer predator and prey, employer and employee, but allies bound by shared purpose and mutual destruction. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Clara caught their reflection in the cracked mirror by the door. 2 figures dressed in black, armed and dangerous, walking toward either justice or damnation. She no longer cared which.
Outside, the
city held its breath, waiting for midnight and the reckoning it would bring. The Riverside warehouse squatted like a concrete cancer against the night sky, its broken windows reflecting the moon in jagged fragments. Clara counted 3 vehicles in the parking lot, including Langford's distinctive Mercedes. Too many for a simple meeting, too many for anything good. "He brought back up," Julian murmured from their position behind a shipping container. "So did we." Clara patted the explosive device she'd assembled from household chemicals, and a timer scavenged from the safe house. 3 years of running had taught her useful skills beyond simply staying hidden. Remember, we go in together, we leave together, no heroics. Julian's hand found hers in the darkness, warm and steady, despite the circumstances. "Whatever happens in there, I want you to..." "No, don't." Clara cut him off before he could finish the thought. "Save the deathbed confessions for after we survive this." They moved through the shadows like synchronized dancers. Clara's training from a life she'd tried to forget, meshing perfectly with Julian's ruthless precision. The warehouse's rear entrance had been left unlocked, another sign that Langford wanted them inside. The main floor stretched out like a concrete cathedral, broken only by support pillars and abandoned machinery. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly yellow, turning their shadows into grotesque giants on the walls. Clara could smell oil and rust and something else, something organic and wrong. "Welcome." Langford's voice echoed from the catwalks above. Clara spun, pistol drawn, but he wasn't visible in the maze of metal and darkness overhead. "Punctual as always, Julian. I must say I'm disappointed you brought a friend." "Show yourself, Victor." Julian's voice carried deadly calm. "I will. But first, Let me show you something else. Floodlights blazed to life, temporarily blinding Clara. When her vision cleared, she saw them. 3 bodies arranged in chairs at the warehouse's center, heads lolled forward like broken dolls. No, Julian breathed. Clara recognized the middle figure despite the blood. James Morrison, Marcus's younger brother. The resemblance was unmistakable, even in death. The Morrison family always was trouble, Langford called down. First Marcus, trying to expose your dear Clara's little embezzlement scheme. Then James, asking inconvenient questions about his brother's death. And finally, dear Rebecca. The woman on the left lifted her head slowly, revealing a face Clara had seen in photographs. Julian kept locked in his office safe. Rebecca Blake, Julian's sister, not dead. Not yet. Let her go. Julian stepped forward, but Clara caught his arm. It's a trap, she hissed. Of course it's a trap. Langford's laughter drifted down like falling glass. But it's also justice. See, Julian, your father wasn't the noble whistleblower you thought he was. He was stealing from me, using insider information to short my stocks, while pretending to expose my senator friend. You're lying. Am I? Ask your sister. She found his real files just last week. That's why she's here, actually. Rebecca always was too curious for her own good. Rebecca raised her head with obvious effort, meeting Julian's eyes across the warehouse floor. Even from a distance, Clara could see the defeat written in her posture. It's true, Rebecca called out, her voice carrying despite the drugs they'd obviously given her. Dad was stealing from everyone. The insurance money from his death, it all went to paying back what he'd taken. Julian's world collapsed in real time. Clara watched his carefully constructed mythology crumble, 20 years of purpose dissolving into ash and bitter truth. But here's the beautiful part, Langford continued. Your father didn't just steal money. He stole something else. Something that belongs to me. What? You, Julian? You and your sister both? DNA is such a reliable truth-teller, don't you think? The words hit like a physical blow. Clara felt Julian stagger beside her, understanding flooding his features with sick realization. That's right. Langford began descending the metal stairs, finally showing himself. David Blake wasn't your father. I am. Which makes this whole revenge fantasy rather awkwardly Oedipal, wouldn't you say, my bitch? Technically, you're my son of a bitch. Langford reached the warehouse floor, flanked by 2 men with assault rifles. 20 years I've watched you grow up, watched you build your little empire, waiting for the right moment to claim what's mine. Clara's mind raced through implications. If Langford was Julian's father, then everything changed. The inheritance, the company, even Julian's motivation for revenge. All of it built on lies. Why now? Julian's voice was hollow. Because Blake Industries is worth more in bankruptcy than it is operational. I needed you to destroy it from within, make it worthless to outside investors. Langford smiled with paternal pride. And you've done such a wonderful job. The poisoning, Clara realized. You weren't trying to kill him, you were weakening him. It's making him paranoid, desperate. Very good, dear, though I must say your presence complicated things considerably. Langford turned his attention to Clara. I'd been planning to eliminate you quietly after you'd served your purpose. The mysterious death of Julian's housekeeper, driven to suicide by guilt over her Chicago sins. It would have been poetic. What purpose? But even as Clara asked, she knew. You were supposed to kill Julian for me, to make it look like a crime of passion. A servant girl who'd fallen in love with her employer and couldn't bear his rejection. Langford's eyes glittered with cruel amusement. I fed you just enough information to make you desperate, gave Julian just enough suspicion to make him trust you. I needed you both emotionally invested before the final act. The betrayal cut deeper than Clara had expected. She thought Julian had chosen her as an ally, but he'd been manipulated just as thoroughly as she had. They were both puppets, dancing to Langford's strings. But then you had to go and actually fall for each other. Langford continued with mock disappointment. Real affection is so inconvenient for a good murder plot. Julian moved without warning, launching himself toward the chairs where Rebecca sat bound. Clara moved to cover him, but Langford's men were ready. Gunfire erupted through the warehouse. Muzzle flashes strobing like deadly fireworks. Clara felt something punch into her shoulder, spinning her around. She hit the concrete hard, tasting blood and concrete dust. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Julian scream her name. Stop! The gunfire ceased. Clara struggled to her knees, pressing her hand against the bleeding wound in her shoulder. Julian knelt beside Rebecca's chair, his hands working at her bonds. Step away from her son. I'm not your son. Julian's voice carried venom that could. Strip paint. DNA says otherwise. Blood says otherwise. Langford approached slowly, his own weapon drawn. And money says I own everything you think is yours. You want Blake Industries? Take it. Julian freed Rebecca's hands, helping her stand on shaking legs. I never wanted your poison empire anyway. Oh. But I don't just want the company, Julian. I want you and your lovely sister and your murderous girlfriend. Langford's smile was winter frost. Dead heirs can't contest wills. Dead children can't expose their father's sins. Clara saw the trap closing around them. Langford had never intended to let any of them leave the warehouse alive. This wasn't about business or revenge or even family. This was about tying up loose ends with bullets and gasoline. But Clara had learned long ago that the only way to survive was to be more dangerous than the thing trying to kill you. The explosive device in her jacket pocket wouldn't bring down the entire warehouse, but it would create enough chaos for them to escape. If she could reach the support column behind Langford's position, she could sacrifice herself to save Julian and Rebecca. If she could finally do something right, Clara met Julian's eyes across the warehouse floor and saw understanding pass. Between them, he knew what she was planning, knew what it would cost. I love you, she mouthed silently. Then she ran toward her death and toward their salvation. The explosion shattered the night like the breaking of the world. Clara had expected death. Ada had run toward it with open arms and no regrets. Instead, she found herself pinned beneath a steel beam, her ribs screaming protest with each shallow breath. Around her, the warehouse burned with the hungry enthusiasm of a structure that had waited decades for an excuse to die. Clara. Julian's voice cut through the roar of flames and collapsing concrete. She tried to answer but could only manage a whisper of sound. The beam across her chest felt like the weight of all her sins made manifest. Here, she gasped. Here, he materialized through the smoke like an avenging angel, his face streaked with soot and blood. Behind him, Rebecca leaned heavily against a support column that had somehow survived the blast. Don't move, Julian commanded, his hands already working at the beam. Rebecca, help me lift this. Julian? No. Clara's voice was stronger now, fed by desperation. The building's coming down. Get Rebecca out. We all leave or none of us do. His eyes met hers with fierce determination. I'm not losing you, Clara. Not after everything. You already lost me. She smiled despite the pain. The moment I walked into that restaurant, I was gone. But that's okay. Some things are worth dying for. You're not dying. Julian and Rebecca managed to shift the beam enough for Clara to pull herself free. Her legs worked barely, but she could move. We're all getting out of here. They stumbled through the burning maze of the warehouse, Clara supported between Julian and Rebecca. Behind them, she could hear Langford screaming orders to his surviving men. The explosion had scattered them, but it hadn't ended the threat. Car, Rebecca gasped, parked by the loading dock. They made it outside just as the warehouse's roof began to collapse in earnest. Julian helped Clara into the passenger seat while Rebecca took the wheel, her hands steadier than her brother's despite everything she'd endured. Where? Rebecca asked. Hospital, Julian said immediately. No. Clara's voice carried finality. Safe house first, medical attention second. If we go to a hospital, Langford will find us within hours. Clara, he's not dead, Julian. I saw him stumble out the back entrance before the roof came down. Clara coughed, tasting blood. This isn't over. They drove through the night in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Clara watched the city pass by outside her window. wondering if this was how it felt to be alive. Really, truly alive, instead of just surviving. The safe house looked smaller with 3 people in it. But Rebecca worked efficiently to clean Clara's wounds while Julian stood guard at the window. The bullet had passed through her shoulder cleanly, missing anything vital. She'd live. The question was whether she'd live free. "I need to ask you something," Clara said, when Rebecca finished bandaging her shoulder. "About your father. About David Blake." Rebecca's expression tightened. "What about him? Do you believe Langford? About the DNA? The paternity?" Clara watched Julian's reflection in the window, saw his shoulders tense. "Because men like Victor Langford lie as easily as they breathe. The files I found were real." Rebecca sank into a chair, exhaustion written in every line of her body. Dad had been taking money from Langford's accounts, using insider information to play the markets. But the amounts don't match what Victor claimed. "What do you mean Dad wasn't stealing millions? He was stealing thousands. Small amounts transferred to medical accounts." Rebecca met Clara's eyes. "Our mother was dying of cancer.
Ow.
The experimental. Treatments weren't covered by insurance." Julian turned from the window, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. So he was stealing, but not for greed. He was trying to save Mom's life. Rebecca's voice broke slightly. The timing matches perfectly. Every transfer corresponds to a treatment date, a hospital bill. Clara felt the pieces clicking together like tumblers in a lock. Langford found out and used it as leverage. "Oh, probably. Blackmailed your father into giving him insider information? Till Dad tried to break free," Julian said slowly. "Threatened to expose everything rather than continue being Langford's puppet. So Langford had him killed and then spent 20 years gaslighting you into believing your father was a thief." Clara struggled to her feet, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. "The paternity claim is probably another lie designed to destroy your sense of identity. We could get a DNA test," Rebecca suggested. "No." Julian's voice was firm. "It doesn't matter. David Blake raised me, loved me, died protecting his family's honor. That makes him my father in every way that counts." Clara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. After everything he'd learned, all the betrayals and revelations, Julian was choosing love over biology, truth over manipulation. "So what now?" Rebecca asked. "Langford will come after us. He can't afford to let us live with what we know. Actually, he can't afford to kill us either." Clara moved to the laptop Julian had left on the small table. "Because while you two were playing Family Reunion, I was uploading everything to Dead Man's Switch." The photo Julian showed him, the evidence about Senator Michaels, even the warehouse meeting. All of it scheduled to release to every major news outlet if we don't check in every 24 hours. Julian stared at her. "When did you while you were getting the car ready?" "I've been planning contingencies since the moment we left the Meridian Club." Clara's smile held no warmth. "Langford taught me something valuable tonight.
Ow.
Sometimes the best weapon is information." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but Clara recognized the pattern now. "Clever girl. But you're still thinking too small. Check your email." Clara opened her laptop and navigated to a secure account sheet, set up years ago in Chicago. A single message waited, with an attachment that made her blood freeze. Video footage from Marcus Morrison's office. The night she killed him, clear high-definition proof of her guilt. But that wasn't what made her hands shake. The timestamp showed the video was recorded 3 years ago, but the email had been sent just minutes ago. "From an account registered to David Blake." "That's impossible," Rebecca breathed, reading over Clara's shoulder.
Dad's been dead for 20 years, has he?
Lara's mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. "Julian, you said someone tried to poison you at Christmas? Someone with access to your house, your food, your private spaces?" "You think it was Julian?" Couldn't finish the thought. "I think we've been playing the wrong game entirely." Clara closed the laptop and reached for her jacket. "There's only one way to find out for sure. Where are you going?" "To dig up your father's grave." The Greenwood Cemetery felt like a city of the dead under the pre-dawn sky. Ancient oaks stood sentinel over marble monuments to forgotten lives, their branches reaching toward stars that seemed too distant to care about earthly suffering. David Blake's headstone was modest for a man who'd supposedly embezzled millions. Fresh flowers lay against the granite, roses that couldn't have been there more than a day. "Someone's been here recently," Rebecca whispered. Julian knelt beside the grave, his fingers tracing the carved dates, 1962 to 2003. God, he was only 41. The same age you are now, Clara realized. Hey, Julian. What if the car accident was staged? What if your father didn't die but was forced to disappear? That's insane, is it? Langford had the resources, the connections. Easier to fake a death than commit an actual murder, especially if he needed David alive for some reason. Clara studied the headstone's placement, noting how it sat slightly askew compared to the others in the row. Now, what if this grave is empty? Before Julian could protest, Clara was already digging with her hands, clawing at the soft earth beside the headstone. Rebecca joined her, then Julian. All three of them driven by desperate need to know the truth. 6 inches down, Clara's fingers struck metal. Not a coffin, but something smaller. She pulled it free and held it up to the moonlight. A cell phone. Modern, expensive, and very much not 20 years old. "Still getting service," Julian noted, checking the display. 3 missed calls from tonight, all from the same number. He dialed it. The phone rang once before a familiar voice answered. "Hello, son." David Blake was alive, and he'd been watching them all along. "Dad." Julian's voice broke on the word. "Need to meet all of us. There are things you need to understand about Victor Langford, about your mother's death, about why I had to disappear." The voice that had haunted Julian's dreams for 20 years was tired but steady. "And there are things you need to know about Clara's real purpose in Chicago." Clara felt the world tilt around her. "What do you mean?" "Marcus Morrison wasn't your first kill, dear. He was your 15th. And every single one of them was working for Victor Langford. The line went dead, leaving them alone with the sound of their own breathing and the weight of revelations that rewrote everything they thought they knew about themselves. 3 hours later, they sat in a diner at the edge of the city, waiting for a dead man to explain how the living had been manipulated into becoming killers. Clara stared at her reflection in the coffee cup and wondered, how many other lives she'd taken in the name of justice she'd never understood. How many other Marcus Morrisons had died by her hand, thinking they were victims when they were actually predators. Julian reached across the table and took her hand. "Whatever he tells us, we face it together. Even if I'm not who you think I am. Especially then." His fingers interlaced with hers, warm and steady, despite everything. "Because whoever you were, whoever you've been, right now you're the woman who saved my life and my sister's life. That's all that matters to me." Nodded agreement. Family isn't about blood or DNA or shared history. It's about choosing to stand together when everything falls apart. Outside, dawn painted the sky in shades of hope and possibility. They'd survived the night, survived Langford's web of lies and manipulation. Whatever David Blake revealed about their pasts, they would face it as they'd faced everything else. The diner's bell chimed as an older man entered. His hair silver, but his eyes unmistakably familiar. David Blake had aged in 20 years of hiding, but the love in his expression as he looked at his children was timeless. "Let me tell you a story," he said, sliding into the booth beside them, "about a man who tried to destroy a family and the daughter who helped him do it without knowing why." Clara squeezed Julian's hand tighter and prepared to learn. The truth about the blood on her hands and the love that might finally wash it clean. Outside, the sun rose on a world where the dead could return and the damned could find redemption in each other's arms. The end. Like this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.